Well, hi, my name is Harold Bryant, and I'm 63 years old, and I was approached by my granddaughter to do an interview, and I had an interesting story out of many that I thought I would share with her, and I'd like to do that today. So the interesting story that I have is about a lettuce strike, like the lettuce that you eat with your hamburger or something, lettuce. And it was in 1979, California, in Imperial Valley. And at the time, I was working as a security agent. And we did particular things of bodyguard work, asset protection. Cesar Chavez and the union were on strike at that time, so the farm worker was concerned about his property. So with me being in charge of about 10 other security guys, and some of these were really young college-age student guys, and some are retired guys. No one that was like a typical sheriff or anything like that. And we were all out in the field trying to protect this farmer's field from thousands of farm workers that were lined up along the road. And it was 11 of us that were going to defend this property from thousands of farm workers. Well, eventually they resolved the strike, but it came at a heavy price. During the period where I was on this farm, we were facing the road, for example, and we saw a crowd of thousands with the sun coming up behind them. So all we saw was silhouettes. And as we were standing there, we stood there with our hands behind our backs like soldiers lined up. None of us, well, exception of me, no one was armed. They didn't have a baton, they didn't have a gun, they didn't have mace, they didn't have anything. I, on the other hand, pretty experienced, had a Kevlar vest on. I had 2 guns on me, one visible, one not. I had mace and a baton. So I was leading this group. And as we were facing these farm workers, we could hear them all yelling and screaming at us in Spanish. And they would come through the irrigation ditch, off the road through the irrigation ditch, start coming towards us, several at a time. And I would leave my crew behind, and I would walk forward and point to the road, like, go back. And as I did that, huge rocks started landing all around me. I was looking, I could hear the thud, thud, thud. And I kind of ignored it, foolishly, and the guys would retreat back behind there, but you couldn't see the rocks coming because of the sun coming up behind the farm workers, the strikers, and these rocks were landing all around us, not just me, but my whole crew. Some of these young guys, one of them actually fainted from fear. One was throwing up. He had taken behind the cars and he's throwing up, and they all wanted to leave because they were afraid. And I managed to keep them in line, and we stayed there, and nothing really happened to us. That was day one. We were there for, I was there for 2 weeks total time. And once we were retreated for the night, we went back to our hotel room, and coming back the next day, some of the, what they call scabs, some of the non-union workers were in a bus coming towards the farms. And we saw them going through the picket lines, and they turned the bus over. A crowd literally pushed and turned this bus over on its side. And from where we were at, we could see the bus light up in flames. So they torched the bus with people in it. So we decided at that point that it's time for us all to leave. So we got into our rental cars, and we had to go through the crowd, thousands of these farm workers on either side of us, and we had to push through the crowd very slowly. And as we're going down the road, and the crowd would just separate a little bit. Well, the guy that was driving the one car that I was in, there was 4 of us in there, he had a shotgun. So he rolls his window down, and he leans the shotgun out, and he fires into the crowd. And I'm thinking, what the heck is this guy doing, shooting these people that are just in the road? But he was in fear. He was, all of us in this car were extremely in fear. There were several cars behind us too. We were leading. So he fires off into the crowd of these people. I see people falling over. He then stops the car and gets out of the car with the shotgun. He walks up and he hits a guy that comes up to him and breaks the shotgun butt off. And then he racks another round and fires into the crowd again. Now, at that point, I'm thinking 2 things. One, this guy's crazy. He's shooting innocent people without, they didn't have guns on them that I could see. However, At one point, when I'm sitting in the passenger side seat, I could hear the car being hit with something. It sounded like rocks were hitting the car. And they were coming up to my side. So I pushed my door open and pulled my gun and aimed it towards them just to scare them to get them away. And when I saw that they were still coming at me, I reholstered my gun and pulled out my stick and was able to hit some hands that were coming at me. And as I got back into the car, because it started to move, I could see holes in the car. So the rocks that I were hearing was not rocks, they were bullets hitting the car. Why none of us got shot in that car, I'll never know to this day. The guy that was driving it was shooting the people with the shotgun was a lead security guy for another contact security firm that we had hired besides us. And these guys had dogs, canines. And as we stopped the car, in the back, some of the dogs, they let them loose. And I can see the dogs just tearing into people all over, growling and just pulling people to the ground and chewing on them. And the guy with the shotgun goes out and fires some more rounds. I could just see people in the distance either falling from being hit or diving into the dirt. I couldn't tell at that point. But I did see a guy who I later learned was killed. The guy came up and had grabbed the security guy, and the security guy had swung him around. He had what's called a Kel light. It's a big metal flashlight. And as the guy turned, he starts to run. The guy grabs him by the back of the shirt and sinks the flashlight into the back of his head. And from where I was at, all I could see was the guy's head open up and the guy fell on the ground. That's the guy I think that was later learned to have died. Although later I learned that there was a man, Rufino Contreras, who was shot and died. So I don't know if that was one of the guys that was shot or the guy with the flashlight got killed. But it was an extremely scary event. And that was in 1979. I must have been 21 years old at the time, I believe. And the sheriff's department was there. And I saw them with a camera crew, the sheriff's camera crew with a truck. It said sheriff's on it, and then the camera was out there. So I had walked up to them, this is earlier, and I said, hey, if anything happens, are you guys going to intervene here? And the sheriff, without saying anything, just looked at me and just shook his head like, nope, whatever happens is on you guys. So I went back to my owner and told him, or my manager, and told him what the sheriffs had indicated, that they weren't going to get involved in this thing.